Good morning, everybody. We'd like to welcome here to the CALLERLAB Convention. This is Tuesday, April 19th. It's 9 o'clock, and our topic here is history and heritage. Nobody probably in this whole convention likes history more than I do. My name is Junck. I'm here, the moderator, this morning. But basically, I'm going to turn this over to the four gentlemen to my right, and they're going to talk about the early days of calling, some of their early things that they did early in their careers. And I'm going to start here to my immediate right and just introduce them to you first, give you a little bit of history about them. Sitting next to me, he's from Hot Springs, Arkansas, Cal Golden. And I want you to listen to how long these guys have been calling. Cal started calling in 1947. Sitting next to him from Estes Park, Colorado, is Frank Lane. Frank began calling in 1948. He began square dancing in 1939, but began calling in 1948. He has a little history about how he got started calling. We just discussed that. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Sitting next to him is Marshall Flippo. Marshall Flippo's been calling 60 years and calling full-time since 1961. Seated next to him is John Jones from Arlington, Texas. John's been calling 56 years. He has attended all 38 CALLERLAB convention, has called dances in, listen to this, 18 different foreign countries, and all but 2 of the United States. That's pretty impressive. Anyway, this is our session on history, and I considered a talk with the legends. I'm just going to start off right here with Cal Golden and let him talk a little bit about his history and about how he got started calling. And if you would give a nice hand to Cal Golden.
There it is. It's on now. Good morning. It's very nice to be 83 years old and still somebody will ask you to do something. Anyway, my career started in square dancing in 1947 in Colorado Springs. And the big man of the mountain lived there, Pappy Shaw. And we got a lot of good stuff out of Pappy. What is so amazing is that when I started calling, there were only 12 basic steps. I learned them all the first nights. And then I wrote 100 different ways to do those things. And at that time, that was pretty good choreography, and I didn't know it, but it was anyway. I kept calling there in Colorado Springs. Had a situation that several of these callers had daughters. Well, there wasn't anything bashful about me. The night that their dad was calling somewhere, I made a date with them, and they'd say, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, why don't we go square dancing? Your dad's calling tonight." I got a lot of practice in it, a lot of it. Anyway, we were there in 1949. Something tremendous happened, and I won the Colorado State Champion Callers Contest. And it was an old boy told me, he said, "Well, you may have got it, but you didn't earn it." So I went out and talked to Pappy. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Let me tell you," he said, "you were the only caller out of all the 6 callers that kept the dancers dancing the whole time you called." He said the rest of them was doing different things that didn't have nothing to do with square dancing. And I said, "You mean to tell me I really did?" He said, "Yes, you did." Then he invited me out to his August callers school, and that was quite a deal, I'll tell you. That was quite a deal. In 1950, we moved to Riverside, California. And getting in with the people in that part of the country was a company by the name of Clay Ramsey and his son, and they had old-timer records. And I walked into their office and I said, I'd like to make a record. He said, when are you going to make it? I said, how about next month? And we started cutting records. One of the first ones that we cut was Too Old to Cut the Mustard. That was my biggest selling record, I'll tell you, because everybody liked that. I'm too old. They like to put that in there. Anyway, we went on with life, and in California we called all over the states there, and then we came home, and in 1958, I believe it was, the United States government got a hold of me and said, you're going to, can you think of the name of the town now, to Brussels World's Fair. And I said, I can't go. I got all these dates down. And that colonel said, Sergeant, I don't believe you're hearing me correctly. I said, you're going. I said, yes, sir. And I went. And that was one of the most rewarding things that you could ever do in your life, to go there and call to all those people. We had 50, 60 squares. And we trained a week before we went over there. And they were all dancing good, and they all danced everything that we called. And it was an education that you only have once in a lifetime. We called 3 times a day, and there were millions of people came and watched the square dance. On down the road then. I'm saying it right now. I'm running out of space here. I have one thing left. And in 1982, we recorded a record called God Bless America. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I walked into the hall where Lee Cotton had just been setting the woods on fire. I got up and I turned the water on him, and, man, we went to town with God Bless America, and our people tore the hall down. It was really something. That record was great to me. And that's about the end of my situation. I retired in 1985, 40 years calling, and I was pretty sick and didn't feel like really doing anything. Still don't. And anyway, it's nice to be here. You're going to hear a lot of history out of these other guys here, so God bless you. Thank you.
Okay, Cal, before you pass that on, I want Cal to talk about, he was stationed in Germany and worked the officers club. Am I correct?
Club.
NCO club.
Hey, you've been telling everybody I've been in the Army. I was in the
Air Force.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I hope you'd correct that.
Well, I
didn't say anything in front of there.
Yeah.
I was stationed at Ramstein Air Force Base 4 years, and I had made Chief Master Sergeant by this time. And a friend of mine in El Paso, San Antonio, called me and said, Cal, said, do you want to go to Korea or Vietnam? And I said, are you asking me or are you telling me? He said, neither one. He said, you've got a choice. You can get out. I said, tell them people I'm coming home. And I spent the 4 years there in Germany, and that was the most remarkable 4 years of my lifetime. One of the things that we did there in Germany that really got things going, and we could call in Germany, which we couldn't do in England. In England, I couldn't call square dances. In other words, every time I called a dance, I had to go to the legal officer and get a certificate that was the only thing I was calling was that dance. And I called all over England, but every time I went, I had to get the signature from the legal office. But in the oh man, I can't remember.
What I wanted you to say is talk about is Cal decided that he would like to have some of the Germans dance. So you got permission from your officer to see if they could get a few people to come out and maybe teach them square dancing. How many did you get for that class that you were expecting a few people?
It was a big class, no doubt about it. And the thing of Germany, I had an opportunity to do something there that no other military man ever had. I got a 12-piece orchestra, and I had a guy write the music for each one of these tunes I was going to cut. And I'm telling you, those fiddle players were something else. They were playing the top grade music when they got into that square dancing. But they did. One of the tunes that they really got to swinging on was I Saw the Light. And them fiddles were really going to town. Of course, they had been drinking quite a bit. Because what you do over there when you're the producer of something, you have to take them out to the local bar and buy them a drink. And let me tell you, this was the end of the program, and that was one of the last records we cut. You ought to listen to that record sometime. Listen to the fiddles and why they go to town. Anything else?
No, sir. Give a nice hand to Cal Golden, if you would, please. I want you to notice we talk about not having competition in square dancing. Notice that Cal mentioned he won the calling contest. This next gentleman is going to address the same issue. He got started because of a square dance contest. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Lane.
Well, Cal's a mere child. You're only 83? Yeah. I'm 87.
Good. I hope you say that way you finally begun.
He's younger yet, but he looks worse because he's been rid hard and put away wet.
For those of you listening to the tape, he was pointing at Marshall Flippo.
Back when I was in high school, the lady who was in charge of our girls' phys ed program went to summer school in Colorado and happened to attend or enroll in a folk dancing class that was directed by Pappy Shaw. And she came back all enthused about American folk dancing, square dancing, contras, waltzes, schottisches, polkas. In our high school, we had a variety program once a year that, as I look back at it, it can't be as good as I remember, but it was real professional. I mean, they had a dance band and chorus lines and comedians, and it was great. Well, this year she incorporated a segment of square dancing, and she played it rather cool. She got 8 of us guys off the football team and 8 of the more popular girls to cheerleaders and so forth in the school. And after the show, square dancing became a big thing to do in our high school. During the lunch hour, they opened up the stage, and we could square dance on the stage. We used records, and so we got to square dancing rather regularly. I was a senior in high school when Pearl Harbor occurred, and I went down the next Tuesday and enlisted in the Air Corps, not the Air Force. We were still part of the Army Air Corps. And when you enlisted in the cadet program, you didn't go right away. You waited to be called. And so I started college that fall. And I decided I would start a square dance group up on the campus. And we had held 2 meetings when I got called into the Air Corps and had to leave. And I don't know whether it ever went anywhere or not. But anyway, then I came back out of the service 4 years later and went through the University of Kansas, graduated in journalism, and went to work for a newspaper out in Hutchinson, Kansas. And our first office party, it turns out that our circulation manager, who at that time was what I thought was an elderly gentleman, he was younger than I am now, he turned out to be an old-time square dance caller, and we square danced at the office party, and I got the bug again and got back into it. It so happened that the newspaper sponsored a year-long contest. We're talking about contests. And they did it in quarters. Each quarter they'd have a contest and they'd select a winner. And at the end of the year, they took the 4 quarter winners and had a grand final contest. Well, when they came to the final contest, one of 2 squares was going to win. I had an exhibition group, and the caller for the local recreation district, Eddie Watts, had an exhibition group. And our 2 one of us was going to win. It just so happened that my group won. it did not sit well with Eddie. That's the bad thing about contests. It does lead to some hard feelings.
Also, Frank did not call. He wrote.
No, I did not call for the exhibition group. I was a dancer. But I had called, and I had written the choreography for the exhibition group, and I had called in our practice sessions, and I may have even called in somebody's recreation or something, teaching them how to square dance, but I had never called in public. But Eddie Watts, the other guy with the group, he called out at the fairgrounds every Thursday, and so my group showed up out at the fairgrounds because we loved to dance to Eddie. He was a good caller, and we enjoyed dancing with him. And we had live music. And about the middle of the evening, probably the third or fourth tip, he gets up on the stage to start the next tip, and he says, the next tip's going to be Texas Star. It's going to be called by Frank Lane. He had not consulted me about calling it. And I had never called in public, and we had probably 20 or 25 squares out there. I mean, this was back in the days when lots of people. Well, I thought, you're a big enough one to announce it, I'm going to do it. So I got up and called Texas Star, and I guess it wasn't bad. The rest of the story, and I wasn't going to tell this because it sounds like I'm bragging, and I really am not. I really don't mean to, but I was telling Jerry, I do enough bragging about other things. I don't do, but this particular situation was that just about a year later, around that time, they let Eddie go as a square dance caller for the recreation district and hired me. And I always kidded Eddie after that because we had become good friends. But I kidded him and I said, don't ever call my bluff. So that's the first time I ever ended up square dance calling.
This would be what, 1948?
This was in 1948, yes. Yeah. And by the end of that year, I was calling quite a bit, for the local clubs around. Like Cal said, it was pretty easy because it was all memorized poetry. It was Mary Had a Little Lamb, and we only had about, I think I had more basics than he mentioned, but we only had probably 12 or 15 basics to use. So it wasn't difficult. The sequences, the modules were all memorized.
Everything. And Frank, then you worked at the paper, and you started calling full-time then in 1953 is when you started?
Yes. In the meantime, I had gotten promoted, you might say. When I went to work out of college, this newspaper was the home office for the Harris Papers, which owned 6 papers at that time. And about 3 years later, he sent me down to a little small daily down in Chanute, Kansas, as the advertising manager. And I was spending too much time square dance calling. And about 2 years later, he showed up. My publisher came down, and we went back to talking, and he says, I think you ought to either square dance or a newspaper. And I said, well, I've known this was coming because I've been burning the candle at both ends and probably not doing as good a job at either one as I should. But I said, I think I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to square dance. And he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, can you make a living at that? Now, this was about 60 years or more ago. I said, well, you're paying me $125 a week, which was a real good salary in those days. I mean, I could buy a new car every year and belong to the country club. I said, I can make $500 a week calling squares. And I said, Clark Gable and Betty Davis are making $500 a week, so it's not a bad neighborhood.
Okay, the other thing I wanted Frank to talk about, when CALLERLAB first was formed, it was part of the reason for doing that. There was such an influx of new calls being invented. It was just almost overwhelming how many calls were coming out. Part of the reason was that CALLERLAB wanted to do something was to at least organize or make some sense to all these new calls. But this happened all the way back when Frank was first started calling. In, I don't remember what year you told me, but Red Warwick wrote a call.
I don't remember the year either, Jerry. It just so happened that Red Warwick wrote the call called Snapperoo in April of some year, And at the very same year, same time, Ed Michaels in Ohio wrote Star Through. The national convention that year was held in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, the chairman of the program committee had no way of knowing what different callers were going to present. And so, I don't remember what exact day it was, but Les Gocher had a workshop, half hour or hour, whatever it was, and he introduced Star Through. It was brand new, like I said, just a couple of months old. He introduced Star Through. Now, if any of you knew Les and had conversed with Les came from out in West Texas somewhere. I don't know.
He talked like Flippo is what you're trying to say, Frank.
He come from San Angelo. But anyway, when Les called, when he said square through, it came out square through. He called square throughs. Now, you can imagine in a big convention hall with marginal acoustics, square through and star through, it was almost impossible to differentiate what he was calling. And he had the floor in utter chaos for a half hour. So he concluded his session, and it just so happened the next half hour, the program chairman had scheduled Red Warwick to have a half hour. And he didn't know what he was going to call because they didn't tell you what you had to call. Red introduced his figure that he had written called Snapperoo. Now, it was the exact same figure. A snapperoo and a star through are just identical. Red had the floor beautifully moving using the same material virtually that Les had used the half hour before, because it was easy to differentiate between square through and snapperoo. Had I been wise, because I saw this happen, if I'd been wise, I would have begun calling snapperoo originally right then, but I didn't. I called star through because it was in Willard Orlick's notes, and all the callers in the country were calling star through. About probably 2 or 3 years later, Flip and I worked at Kirkwood forever, and we had a young man from Wagon Mountain, New Mexico, who came in to work with us, Selmer Hovland. And Selmer had just come from Marv Schilling's ranch working with Marv and Buzz Brown from San Diego. And they had both been using snapperoo, and they'd gotten Selmer using snapperoo. And he walked in and said, I was kind of in charge with the staff, I guess, and he said, "Can I use snapperoo this week instead of star through?" And I said, "You can call doodly squat as far as I'm concerned." I said, "What you call Selmer is your business, and do whatever you're comfortable with." Well, I love star figures, and star through killed star figures, because we used to call star with the right or star with the left. Now you can't call star with the right. If you're going to make a star, you got to say make a right-hand star, because if you say star with the right, by the time you've got the word right out, they've already done a star through. And it killed the star figures. And I watched Selmer work that week with Flip and I at Kirkwood, and he was able to do star choreography that I could no longer do, really. And I love star choreography. And so I worked there 3 weeks in a row, and I forget who came in the next week. But anyway, Selmer went on his merry way, and the next week, this old boy started calling snapperoo. And for about probably a year or more, it was a crusade, because I really thought it was better because of what I had seen. After that, I knew it was futile and it was not ever going to replace star through, so it just became my gimmick. I became the caller who calls snapperoo. And that's the way that story happened.
Give a nice hand to Frank Lane, if you would, please. Our next caller on this list is Marshall Flippo. Everybody, I think, pretty much knows Flip as well. And he's too feeble to hold his own microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, look at John Jones, the newest mic stand. He's cheap. Flippo,
Let me tell you why he quit calling snapperoo. With Sealamore one year, we had about 7 or 8 guys in attendance. I don't beat him very much, but I beat him this time. But I beat him 3 times, really. This is one of them. You sit over here between them.
Let me tell you what to say.
We had about 7 or 8 callers. We thought we'd have a little caller session, you know, and Frank was in charge. I tried to be, but when you're around him, he's in charge. So Jerry Haig had a singing call out at that time that and we had barge through, which is a square through 4, and then a trade by, and all that was called barge through. Boy, you can call barge.
Yeah, the other was square the barge.
Yeah.
It was square the barge.
Anyway, I was rudely. Did I interrupt you? Square the barge was a half square through. Okay, it had a square the barge in it. That's 4 hands I just learned. And square the barge. Square the barge. Right? That's square through 4. Didn't I say that? I said, I got up to barge through, didn't I? But just square through 4, and then you'd trade by. And he had a good singing call. For my life, I cannot remember what it was. But, boy, you could sing a lot of words when you said square the barge. Because here they are doing all that stuff. And you're singing. And this was, I really liked it. So we're in there, and old trade by came out. So I paid no attention to it. And Frank was telling all these guys, said, now, you know, we got trade by now. It's going to knock out all the barge through things. And it should have already done it, but there's somebody still calling square the barge. And he looked right at me. And I said, yep, somebody's. Now, I'm not usually flippant, but I was. Is that a word? I said, yeah, some of us out there are still calling snapperoo. By golly, I'll quit if you will. And he did. And I asked him later on, did you ever foul up and call snapperoo? He said, 1 time. I said, well, till that song got really old to me, I kept calling it square the bar. Bless his heart, he really did good on it. I don't think I could have done that.
Marshall Flippo started calling in 1953, and he also called to live music. And 1951. But he called also to live music. He started singing a song to live music some people heard. And talk about your first record then, The Auctioneer.
Oh. I don't stay on beat too well yet, but and then I really come in before the phrase is over. I'm on something else, and it's embarrassing. But I had a call. This is not what you're talking about, but I'll get to that. What was that called? Anyway, I'd called it with a band for a couple of years, I guess. See, Windsor came out with the same song. So I told Lisa I'm going to buy one of those Windsor records, and if I ever have to call my record, I can have it. So I bought it, and it got to this place where it went crazy because I was not waiting for the phrase to end before I started the next phrase. And I said, Nisa, we got a fouled up record here. So she come in and listen. No, Flip. You're not waiting for it. I said, I'm not waiting for it. So the next day, anyway, make it a long story short, the next time I called it with a band, I waited for that phrase to end. And I never will forget the rhythm guitar player, Al Parks. I got through with it, and he says, see, when I'd call it with them, when I cut across, they cut across with me. I had no idea that So I would turn around, I got through with it. When I'd called it correctly there, and old Al says, he said, you son of a gun, that's the first time you've called that, right? But they weren't together. Was that the one?
But then Norm Merbach called you.
Oh, yeah, we had a couple of guys come in to a dance we was calling with a band, and we'd made up some kind of a call to the auctioneer. And they were down from Beaumont, Andy Lyons, and then this other guy had a name like something else, Bouvier or something like that. Fred Bouvier. No, not Fred Bouvier, no. But the same kind of name, I couldn't pronounce it. But they went back home, and they had known Norman Merbach, a producer of Blue Star. So they went down and said, oh, boy, Abilene got a call. I think you ought to call him up. Might be able to record it. And they didn't say anything to me about it, but he called me up, and he said, you got a call? He said, can you send me the words to it? Well, it took me a week to write the words down. Sent them to him. He wrote me back and said, callers usually pick up calls that don't have so many words they got to memorize other than the square dance terms. And I agreed with that, and he said, we better not do it. So, and about a month later, he called me back and said, you still want to do that thing? And I said, well, I'm not too sure. I don't know anything about recording. He said, come on down here, I'll show you. And down to Houston is 342 miles from Abilene. So after a dance one night in Abilene, and Nisa and her mother and dad, we took off to Houston, got in there about 8 in the morning, and the recording session was, I believe, 9:30. And we went to this recording studio, and for their acoustics, they had egg crates around. Best sound we ever had, though. But we went in there, and they played it, and I called it, and it was over. But I listened to it, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't have done this. This sounds like it sounded bad. But it went pretty good.
Flip, how many takes did you do? Now, this is done to live music?
No, we did it was the first time. Well, we was right at that time, you went in the studio, and you went in the studio and recording part with the band. They played it. You sang it at the same time.
How many takes?
If the band or you didn't foul up, it is just one take. But it's not that way anymore, I think. Something that slipped. Thank you.
If you would, give a nice hand to Marshall Flippo.
Wait a minute.
What?
I started calling it a chicken coop.
Yes, that I do. Also, I want you to tell that story and tell them what Melton Luttrell told you.
Oh, well, I call it a chicken coop. Well, this is before I called it a chicken. I mean, this is before I learned that call. No, it wasn't either. It was after that. Anyway, Dip and Die was my first call, and there's 12 of us. The chicken coop would hold 3 squares. So we was dancing to records, Jonesy and Joe Lewis and Les Cochran, all those kind of records. That's only records that were out, So we danced to those. And out there, that's all we danced to is records that were called. And so us 12 decided to learn one call apiece, and that's kind of the way it started. And I guess those other guys, I can remember them all, but none of them just continued on. And I continued on. I don't know why. I wasn't making any money playing. Thank you.
So you're talking to 2 guys who came through affiliated off and on through the Lloyd Schaff group out in Colorado Springs to a man who started calling in a chicken coop.
That's the way you're supposed to say it?
I don't think so. And that's why we're here. This is entertainment. This is entertainment. Listen to what you're hearing. This is what I love about our activity. And this is why we're here. I'm so enjoying this, and I hope you are as well. Flippo's going to turn this microphone over to none other than John Jones. John?
I didn't start in a chicken coop. We kept chickens in our chicken coop. I know Al Brundage did. He cleaned out a chicken coop, and that's where he got started.
And us two worked together a lot. Huh? We worked together. We understood each other. Al and I understood. We on the East Coast back there, I worked with him years and years at Atlantic City until the casino come in, tore our wonderful hotel down and put a casino. We had to move up to West Point. But see, we understood each other because we were chicken coop callers.
What was on the floor? Don't step in the chicken coop. You should have seen the Facebook that Deborah put out the other day. That's what I put out as fertilizer on our yard, but she spelled it out exactly what it was. My husband smelled really good for a while. I'm initiating that California gal, boy, I'll tell you for sure. This may be the last opportunity I ever have to be the youngest person on the panel. Except for Jerry Junck, you know. But look at the color of his hair compared to mine, you know. I do not dye my hair. I do not put anything on my hair. It's my American Indian blood that makes my hair black, and I'm proud of it.
Well, John, you know, Flippo always has a thing about my hair, and I tell him some people use Head and Shoulders, some people use Mop and Glow.
And I knew all of them when they had hair on top of their head. I had something I was planning to say, but the first square dance I ever called was in 1948. It was in Brandon, Mississippi, where we lived for 10 years. I'm a native Texan, but my mother's from Mississippi, and we moved over there in 1940 and lived for 10 years, and then we moved back to Texas. But in 1948, I was in the 7th grade, and my mother was a 4th grade school teacher, and she taught a square of her students how to do a square dance, and she told me I was going to call it. And I'd been singing ever since I could remember, and my whole family are musicians. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. She said, I'll teach you the words. And I've still got the book that she taught me this square dance out of. And the name of it was Picking Up Pawpaws, Putting Them in Your Pocket. And I shall never forget it. But I had no idea what I was doing, but it was to the entire school assembly that we did this, and this demonstration square that she had of her students, and she had taught them how to do it. And I did the calling. But one of the dancers in the square was Miss America of 1959, Marianne Mobley. And she was my girlfriend at the time. And I moved. And haven't seen her since. No, I moved. I didn't moon her, no. These dirty old men over here, that's all they can think about. All they can do is think about it anymore. And Cal Golden used to wear custom-made suits, sequined Western suits that he had made out in California, hat and all. You could see him coming for a week. Les Gocher wore the same kinds of suits, sequin suits like you wouldn't believe, gold hats, sequins all over the hats and the whole bit. You ought to see both of them walking side by side at a national convention. said some of the national conventions, they buddied up together, you know, and here they're just glowing coming down the hall. Yeah. But it was interesting to get to know these guys way back at that time, especially when they didn't know who I was. But then my folks moved back to West Texas, and the people decided that we could clean out one of the buildings downtown in Jayton, Texas, and we could square dance in it, high school kids. So they got a caller to come in. I have no idea. It came from Rotan, I think, or something like that. I don't know his name. But he was calling square dances for it. We were having a ball. All the high school kids would go down there every Saturday night. Man, we were just great. And all at once the do-gooders in town decided we were sinning by dancing. And so they shut it down and made us quit. And later on, we did have a square dance in my hometown because there was a local caller there by the name of Sleepy Browning, and he got a square group started, and the whole town and all those people that made us quit, they started square dancing, which was good. And I've been back out there and called dances to a full crowd in the gymnasium in my hometown. And it's been real interesting that, as Jerry said, I have called in 18 different countries around the world. And it's with tour groups and things that we had, but we did demonstrations in all of these countries that we went. It's been a tremendous experience for me. And two of the greatest experiences that I had in that regard, or two or three, I've been all over the USSR when it was still the USSR, and demonstrating and showing square dances to the Russian people. And you'd put on a concert of square dancing, and a couple of them we did in outside parks, and within 30 minutes we'd have 10,000 people gathered watching us square dance. And then we'd get people out of the audience involved in it. In Kiev, in the Ukraine, we had a park, and it was just full of people, and they were just dying to know about America, the United States. I'd like to go back to see what it's like over there now, because there is some square dancing in the Czech Republic now. And other experience, I've been to the People's Republic of China 3 times to show and demonstrate square dancing, and also to Tibet twice. And that tremendous experience. Talking about high-level calling and square dancing, is 14,000 feet is the elevation in Lhasa, Tibet. And that's in the valley. The mountain's way up above that. You know, it's right next to Nepal, where Mount Everest is. And some of you may recall years ago that there was a group of Chinese dancers came over to the CALLERLAB convention in L.A., and I knew them all. Their instructor was Tang Xiaoling, Madame Tang Xiaoling. She could not speak English. She could say, "I love you." And I could not speak Chinese. I could say thank you, which is xie xie. I could count to 4 in Chinese, er sun su, for grand square. Xiaoling went with us on our trips, and every town that we went to, she would spend 2 days working with the local dancers, Ballroom Dancers Association people of the Chinese Dancers Association, teaching them square dancing. And then she would tell me what she had taught, and then we would take our group in, and I would call to these people, and then we'd mix together. We had guides on our trips as well that spoke English and Chinese and the Tibetan language. And incidentally, there's 4 different languages in Tibet. They come from a different part of the country. They can't understand each other. It's very difficult for them. But anyway, we were with a group, and we were in one of the Buddhist temples. And Xiaoling walked up to me, and she said, "John, heads a pass through, separate around one." And then she went. For the take, she motioned her hands like she did not know what to do next. And then I told her the next calls to do, how to finish it, to an alley man left. And she said, "Okay." She wrote them down. We'd get back to the hotel when it was time for us to go to call to the local people, and she would tell me what calls she had taught. And our guides were sitting there. They wanted to interpret, but they didn't have to. And they said, "This is amazing to us. Neither of you speak the other's language, but yet you're communicating in a language that we do not know." And they said, "We have never seen anything like this before in our life." And it was amazing that we could go, she would teach, and I would go call, and they would mix with them. Just a fantastic experience. In Chengdu, China, one evening, we were out in a park, and I had taken my equipment, my little 75, micro 75, and one 12-inch speaker. I had a suitcase lined with all this stuff in it, and had it set up over there, and I started playing music, and we started dancing, and you cannot believe the number of Chinese people that gathered in that park over there to watch us dance, and wanted to know, how can we do this? If I were a new caller, I'd go to China. If you only got a quarter per person per night, you'd be a millionaire in a short while, because those people are dying to do anything of that nature. But they haven't gotten any English-speaking callers over there yet, and that's a real problem. We can't teach them how to call really good because they can't understand our language. And until they do, it's going to be a problem for them. It's still hanging on, but not near like we would like to see it. But in Tibet, we showed those people how to square dance. Then they showed us their native dance. And Nita Page was the tour director and set all this up. Nita is also part Indian. And she said, John, I think we're on a reservation. We truly believe that our American Indians migrated from that part of the world because there's too many things that they do that are alike. I'll digress from that just a moment. I've had the opportunity of playing golf with these two guys sitting next to me one time, and that was at Kirkwood at the golf course out there, and I'm a bad golfer. Frank thinks he's a good golfer. Used to think he was a good golfer. Now, he has played golf a lot, and he's really serious about his golf. Flippo's a scratch golfer, kind of like I was, but he was better than I was. But we got out on the golf course to play golf, and we played the first hole, and I think I had about a 10 or 12, and Flippo like 6 or 7. Frank pars the hole. Flip walked over to me and said, we make him mad. He can't play very good. On the second hole, of course, Frank had the honor, Just as he got ready to start, and that second hole was right down beside a wooded area, and a fence is out of bounds. Just as he got ready to start it, I played golf at home with the guys that I worked with, and we cut up and played all the time. We didn't be quiet. No matter we said anything we could think of to whoever was getting ready to hit the ball, to try to distract them. Just as Frank started his backswing, I said, don't let those trees bother you. He put 4 balls out in them woods. He said, would you two, Flip and I laying on the ground laughing, would you two shut up? And I said, no. Anyway, it was a good deal. I just had to mention that. Oh, yeah. Let me tell this, and I'll jump on that. Frank said something about how he got into calling full time. Well, I worked for the city of Arlington for 33 years in public works, and for 5 years I was a chief building official, and I had to wear a suit and a tie, and I hated every day of it. I was a cowboy. I didn't want to wear that stuff. So anyway, every Tuesday I had to go to a afternoon dinner meeting with the city council and all the city heads, and I was late because I had a guy chewing me out in my office. I was a little bit late getting to the meeting, and I sat down across the table from the mayor pro tem. He said, where have you been, Jones, calling a square dance? Of course, everybody in Arlington knew that I called square dances. And I said, no, but I'd rather be there as here. He said, how would you like to do that full time? I stuck out my arm, and I said, twist it, and I'm out of here. He said, yeah, you would, too. And I said, yep, I'll be gone. But it didn't turn out that way. I stayed there for 33 years and got retired. This paper that I gave you as a handout, I'm sorry that it's not in color. Mine is, because Deborah put all this together for us, and it's part of our syllabus that we use at our collar schools. And I'm not going to go into that thing and read all that mess to you or point it out to you. Look on page 106, bottom right-hand corner of the pages. If you've heard of Bob Osgood, there's a good picture of Bob Osgood receiving the Millennium Award that Jim Mayo presented to him out in California. And at that particular thing, we had it was a big presentation and a lot of people in the audience to see this, and because other things were going on. And Bob had something else he had to do, and Tony Oxendine and Jim Mayo made the presentation. And they came to Deborah and me and said, you got to keep Bob on stage. Well, as soon as Bob made his little introduction statement, he said, I've got to go. And I said, no, you need to sit down. He said, no, I'm leaving. I've got something else I got to do. And Deborah grabbed one side of him, and I got the other side of him. I said, you're sitting down. You ain't going anywhere. And so we made him sit there until Jim and Tony got done with the presentation. He said, thank you for making me stay. But that's the only Millennium Award that we've ever handed out. And there's a photo of Pappy Shaw. There's a photo of Henry Ford toward the front of the book. But look on the last page, page 111, back there on the back. At the bottom of that page is the photo of the first CALLERLAB convention in St. Louis, Missouri in 1974. And if you haven't looked at this photo, those of you who know, please keep your mouth shut. If anybody can point me out, I'll give you $100. No, I was just kidding. I ain't got 100, but look at the photo, and I'll tell you where I am. The big sign back there at the back that says "Working Together," the lower left-hand corner is right on top of my head.
Yep, I picked it up. Where's the money?
And right behind me, to your left, my right, and behind me is Frank Lane. I don't know where Flip and Cal are. They're probably down toward the front because they're kind of short and had to get down. I can tell you in the very left side of the photo is Bob Osgood. See the patch over his eye? Right on the front row, sitting in front of him, is Melton with his legs crossed and his hands folded in front of him. Right near the center of the photo is Ted Fry and Johnny Wyckoff. Look on the far right on the front row is Dave Taylor, and right next to him is Johnny LeClaire.
Yes.
Now, those I do know right offhand, but I know the four of us here were at that convention, and we're all in that photo. And that's all I'm going to point out with regard to that. Cal asked me to tell, and Deborah had mentioned this to me, to tell this story about the first dance I ever called in Japan. Jerry, don't let me take too much time. That first dance in Japan was in Osaka, Japan. We flew into Tokyo, and Matt Asanuma met me at the airport, took me down to that bullet train. I take it back. I stayed overnight first, and then the next day took me down to the bullet train station. And that sucker went about 250 miles an hour. You cannot believe how the power poles that we have here in the United States looked like a picket fence going by that was going so fast. Unbelievable. And it doesn't turn around when it gets to the other end. They turn the seats around, and the train goes back the other way. When we got to Osaka, there was a lady met us there. He told us, he said, when you get off of the train, you step off and you step on a black box that will be painted on the floor, and you stand there. Do not move. Somebody will come get you. I said, I hope so, because I can't speak Japanese and I can't read the signs. So they did. A lady picked us up. My first wife, Shirley, Deborah, Vernon's mother, was with me, and put us up in a hotel. They said the square dance starts at 6 p.m. Wow, early. Yes, we dance early. Picked us up like 4 o'clock, 4:30. We go to the dance venue. Everybody that came to the dance, and there was a hall full of beautiful square dance costumes. All women. And to us, they all look alike. To them, we all look alike. But anyway, all women. And at that time, I was a pure sight caller. I started out with memory like we all did. I mean, everything was memorized, the entire sequence. I started out calling with a band, too. And I had my own band for a short while. And I thought, oh, my God, I can't do this. I can't remember all the modules that I used to do. I had to start racking my brain. I made it through the first tip with memory, and I was watching the dancers really close. And I had about 2 squares of them that I could remember, the costumes that they had on. Squared up for the second tip, they changed partners, swapped sides, gotten different squares. I had to start all over again. And I said, I ain't going to make it. I know I cannot call a whole dance from memory because I can't remember all the things that I used to do. At the end of the second tip, caller Michelle Osawa, who lives over there, and 3 other men showed up apologizing for being late because they had gotten delayed in traffic. They each one picked a partner, and they danced right in front of me the rest of the evening with that same partner in the same positions because they knew I was a sight caller. I made it through the dance after that, but I thought, God would like to kill me. It was horrible. I was sweating bullets. And I said, why did you not tell me that this was going to be an all-female dance before I came so I could get prepared? And they said, we were afraid you would not call for us if we told you. But I made friends with those people. They followed me all over Japan. And we wound up in Mount Fuji doing a festival over there. And half of them, and I'd go dance with them. I'd go get in the square with all 8 women, you know, and I'd take one of their places. And it turned out to be really good. But I've had tons of experience all over the world, and it's been great. One other thing, Deborah asked me to write down one day some things that I had introduced to CALLERLAB or to the Board of Governors, and I didn't realize that the list was going to be so long by the time I got done with it. I'm not going to bore you with all of that mess. But a couple of things that I did do that I was asked to do, when Jack Lazary was chairman of the board, he asked me to write the oath of office that the Board of Governors members take each year. And I did that. When Mike Seastrom was chairman of the board, he asked me to write a program of review of the executive director for the EC to have. And I did that with lots of help with various things. But the one thing I did want to point out to everybody that is in our history, at that first convention in 1974, prior to that, in our home area in the Midwest, we were catching hand positioning situations from both sides of the United States. In the east, they were using the forearm hoe. In the west, they were using the pigeon wing. Up in Colorado, where Frank was, they were using the thumb grip, hands up position. And in Texas, all up and down through the Midwest, we looked like robots trying to dance with the various people that were coming through. Some were up and some were down, and it was a darn mess. And I kept telling everybody, I said, there's going to be an International Callers Association beginning in April in St. Louis. Let's hold off, and when we get there, I think we will have an answer when we come home. When I got there and I found out it wasn't on the agenda, I started doing some talking. Jim Mayo said, there's no way we're going to talk about that. I went to Frank Lane, and he said, forget it. We're not bringing up that. That's when we began having some of the best conversations you ever saw in your life in the lobby of the hotel. It would go on to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Various groups discussing and debating. And I finally made the statement. I told Frank and Jim both. I said, are you going to tell me that this organization, that's the International Association of Square Dance Callers, hadn't got guts enough to bring this up and discuss it and make a decision? They called a special board meeting. And after it was over with the next morning, it became the main topic of 3 round-robin sessions that we had. For about 3 years. Right. And it was hot debate. It was really hot debate. But the decision was finally made to use the pigeon wing hands-up positioning for it. We later adopted a policy to recognize that there are regional differences with styling. We're the only country in the world that won't standardize. All other countries have. But anyway, at that meeting, a famous comment by the wife of Von Parrish, Jean Parrish, went to the microphone at the general meeting, and she said, I don't care where the men put their hands as long as they're gentle with them. Tore us all apart. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Jones. This, I could not have been asked to moderate a session that I would enjoy more than with these gentlemen. I've known them all for a lot of years, and I have the utmost respect for them. And I personally have sat here and thoroughly enjoyed them. And I would like to know if you would like to have a question for them, if you'd step up to that microphone. And we have a serious problem because it's Ernie Kinney, and that's not good.
Not really. He has a basement group that he called for. I've got a basement group.
Turn around, Frank.
Who turned it off? I have a little basement group in the summertime for about 12 weeks that we do kind of an A2 workshop, and that's the only calling.
That was Ernie Kinney. Okay, anybody else? A question for the panel? With that in mind, I have known these guys for many, many years. Here comes someone. Ron?
Ron Black from Los Angeles. With all the history, gentlemen, what are some of the funniest things that ever happened to you at a dance?
Good question.
That would just absolutely rip your sides out with laughter.
Good question.
I didn't put up with that kind of stuff. No, I guess the only time Vernon is the only one who's ever been able to break me up at a dance. And he sleeps. And except one other time, nobody could crack me up when I was calling. Any distraction, I paid no attention to it. I would look over it or past it or whatever it might happen to be. Except we had a couple that moved into our area from New York, and he was a little bitty skinny guy. And she was a really large, very overweight lady. And they were dancing right in front of me one night at our club dance. And I was in some kind of serious routine. I don't remember what it was. I finally got to either alley man left and right and left ground or weave the ring or something. And she was right in front of me. And she stood up and she did a bump and grind right in front of me like you. I bet she weighed nearly 400 pounds. And it was right in front of me. And I dropped the microphone laughing.
One of the funniest things, there's a guy come to me at Kirkwood, and I didn't even know him. But there's a whole square of them, and I forget where they were from, but he gave me a falsie. Now, back there, at that time, a lot of women wore falsies. And he said, now, Flippo, when you call up there now, throw this falsie out here and throw it over to our square, because I know 3 of them in there. I know how to do this. I really don't know how to do this, but he said, I know that 3 of them wear falsies. Throw it over in our square. So I'm calling along. I threw that sucker over there, and it hit a guy's foot and come over in a square right in front of me. And the skinniest lady, right opposite what you had, she scooped that up, put it in there, and I'm looking, and he's looking. He saw it, see, and he's looking. And so she didn't crack a smile or nothing. She went over on the far side and had a seat. He comes up there and said, go get my falsie. I said, it's your falsie. You go get it. He says it's going to be funny when she goes to bed and she finds 3 of them. The next morning, I heard we was doing workshop, I heard a big roar down in the left corner of the hall. And I looked back there, and this old boy was in the same square that she was. And the first, they had to get them rattled out of the box. They couldn't dance. They were doing the singing call. And the first time he swung her, he put his hand around her, and that falsie was right there where his hand hit in her back. Best little lady ever. His name was High. They were down from Florida. High. wherever. Anyway, he asked her, said, well, how did you know that was me? She said, I heard you and old Flippo over there making this story up about throwing that false down, and I thought, and it came over to my square, I thought, I'll fix those damn good guys. Boy, and she did. She was just sober-faced as heck, like you.
This isn't exactly about a funny thing in a square dance, but Flippo and I were working at a Selamar for about 30 years. Excuse me. And when we first went to work there, Frank Hamilton and Carolyn were the round dance curers. Now, in those days, especially in Southern California, Frank Hamilton was God. They thought he could walk on water. Flippo and I knew he wasn't because we knew we were. So Frank had a funny habit of when he was teaching rounds, he would go into dissertation about holding your foot 4 inches off the floor at a certain angle, and he would talk for like 10 minutes. And his sweet wife, Carolyn, would be standing over there twiddling her thumbs. It became funny to us. But the people, they didn't mind this because this was God. Well, Flippo and I were downtown at the dime store buying some props for the after party. And we noticed they had a pair of these wind-up teeth. We bought those teeth. We flipped a coin. He lost. He had to do it. Frank didn't trust us anyway because we were the first square dance callers that had ever attended his round dance sessions, and he thought we were spies. But that afternoon at the round dance session, he went into his usual bit about some little very precise move with your hand or your foot or something. And he did do something good. As he talked, he turned so that he was addressing the whole circle. Flippo waited until he had his back to Flip, was addressing the other side of the circle, and he leaned down and he slid those teeth out across the floor. Now, it could not have been more perfect. They went right between Frank's legs, turned around, looked at him in the face, and went... Now, there was not any laughter. There was a gasp because we had offended God. But now we saved the day because his wife, Carolyn, suddenly broke into the loudest laughter. And the minute she began to laugh, then it became okay to laugh. And the whole floor erupted. So Frank had about 10 seconds to decide whether to become human or not.
You know, you remember things that happened while you're sitting here. I was calling a square dance in St. Moritz, Switzerland. There were 400 people there. And I did an exhibition with the square that we had at place. So there was a rather medium-sized lady who was right in front of me, but I could only see her back. So I invited her up on the stage. And I was going to show them how to bow to your partner. Well, I took one look over there, and there they were, all two of them. I'd have been all right if I'd have kept going, but I stopped. And those people went crazy. So I thank you for coming up. You know what? Those people could square dance. I call all afternoon to them. I had one other thing. In California years ago, we had all kinds of dances, you know. People come dressed this way, that way, or don't dress at all. But we had a lot of fun with dances back in those days. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the hour. It has been my distinct privilege to sit here and visit with the legends, with Cal Golden, Frank Lane, Marshall Flippo, and John Jones. Thank you for coming and being part of the CALLERLAB Convention.